This is part 4 of our conversation with Stephen Studdert. The man worked for 3 U.S. presidents and was in charge of the 1989 inaugural of President George Bush. You can watch earlier episodes on our blog at 249.com. During the inauguration where you were in charge, President Bush, what went wrong?
Nothing that we're ever going to admit. I will tell you, in Reagan's first inaugural, I had a personal problem in that I was to accompany Reagan to the White House from the Hill, and came out from the luncheon in Statuary Hall only to realize we hadn't planned for a car. There was no car. And I saw a car in this procession, in the parade, Senate Majority Leader, sign on the door, and he didn't get in it. So I got in it and didn't take the signs off, and all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue I was just waving at people and having a great time. A little detail, yeah. But those are the kind of things that happen. Nothing monumental happened.
Sounds like that went wrong. Maybe more monumental for the Senate Majority Leader.
That was his problem. I needed a ride. I'll tell you the thing you do worry about. You worry about a terrorist attack or something major that's going to cause an enormous disruption and maybe endanger the safety of people. And that you do have great concerns about that. I praise God that the ones I've been involved in have been problem-free in that regard. You also worry about something happening in the nation, like, for example, a terrorist attack or maybe an attack on an embassy that might cause the day of celebration to be blemished, or something that would cause the president to have to step away from the celebratory activities and go do presidential things. And then I suppose the one that really gives the biggest headache is weather. January 20th in Washington, D.C. can be cold. Reagan's first inaugural was the warmest inauguration in history. His second one was the coldest inauguration in history. It was too cold, for example, to risk allowing marching bands to be in a parade. Their lips would freeze to the instruments. It was too cold for police officers to stand on the parade route. The Public Health Service said after 3 hours they'd have frostbite. And Reagan said, we're not going to expose people to those kind of risks. So whether John Kennedy's inaugural, they had to send 10,000 soldiers in the day before and use blowtorches and shovels to remove the snow so they could have an inaugural parade. Weather's the one great big concern always.
One of the details with weather is the debate that seems to pop up, or something interesting that people will watch for. Will the president wear a coat? Tell me who wore a coat and who didn't. Obviously, it sounds like Reagan's first, no need for a coat, it's warm. Certainly for the second one,
everybody had a coat.
Everybody went for a coat.
Yeah.
How big of a debate point is that?
It's actually a point of discussion with advisors involved, and how is this going to be perceived by the viewing public? Are you a wimp? Are you a man? Those kind of concerns. The other thing is, and Jimmy Carter started this, where he got out of the car and walked. And since then, others have gotten out of the car and walked. That doesn't happen, though it's conveyed on the television that it's spontaneous. It doesn't happen spontaneously. It's all pre-planned. The Secret Service knows precisely where he's going to spontaneously get out of the limo and where he's going to walk. And that portion of the route has a much higher level of security, but it's invisible security.
And from your position, the less spontaneity, the better. The more variables you've planned for and can read and react to, the better.
From a management perspective, yes. From a security perspective, spontaneity is the safest, because the bad guys couldn't plan for that.
Yeah. Tell me about, as best you can, for whatever you can tell us, what security preparations have to go in this beyond just the normal protecting of the president and president-elect, and in many cases you have former presidents who are there. What are the security measures that go in planning an inaugural?
An inaugural is different than any other event because you have not only the outgoing president and first lady, the outgoing vice president and his wife, you have the outgoing cabinet officers, you have the incoming president and first lady, the incoming vice president and his wife, you have the incoming cabinet officers, you have the Supreme Court justices, you have generally all of the United States Congress, you have the leadership of America assembled outside in a very public venue. It's a very, very challenging circumstance to secure all of those people in that environment and keep it safe for the 500,000 or million people that are outside on the mall, on the parade route, etc. The Secret Service has the primary responsibility, overall coordination of it. Every law enforcement agency in Washington, D.C., and there are many, for example, the Smithsonian, which you pass on the parade route, has the Smithsonian Police Department. Supreme Court has the Supreme Court Police Department. The Capitol has the Capitol Police Department. All of those coordinate. It's a day of no days off for anybody. Plus, they bring in several thousand police officers from around the country. Utah Highway Patrol is sending 40 officers. It is an enormous security undertaking. The entire diplomatic corps, in other words, all of the foreign diplomats who serve their countries in the United States, are also, all of them, outside, part of that celebration and in movement. And so you just get some sense of the magnitude. There's nothing to compare with it in terms of a security undertaking.
With the State of the Union, someone from the cabinet gets left behind to ensure the order of succession.
There's always one cabinet officer left behind. And
from the outgoing cabinet, because the new one may not have had everybody confirmed.
Well, if you think about this, from a terrorist perspective, at noon on January 20th, the only two constitutional officers now are the president and the vice president have taken the oath of office. That's it. None of his cabinet will have been sworn in yet, so they're not in the line of succession. So on Inauguration Day, the line of succession is very short. There's only, what, I believe 4 people at that moment. The president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and President Pro Tem. After the cabinet is confirmed, then you've got another dozen or so in the line of succession, but not on January 20th.
So when we talk about someone being left behind, the Speaker's going to be there.
Nobody's left behind on that day.
Yeah, they're all there.
They're all present. And they're all outside, all exposed. And the parade route, for example, is lined by 10-story buildings all the way. So you can just imagine the degree of security where all those windows overlook the parade route.
When you get done with the inaugural, and you get a chance to look at the coverage of it, and go back and I'm sure now review the tapes of how the networks covered it. That's a significantly different undertaking now than it would have been even 10 years ago.
I never went back and looked.
Everybody there is going to have a camera in their pocket.
If you got 1 million people, you got 1 million cell phones.
Yeah.
So everybody's recording. Yeah. I never had the luxury to go back and look at any tapes. I didn't have time. I went to work the very next morning in the White House with a portfolio full of very heavy responsibilities. So I never looked back at any of the coverage. Now occasionally I'll see a documentary and I'll watch it and I'll say, oh, we did that, huh? But I never went back and reviewed it. And nothing you can do about it. And it doesn't matter going forward because you're not going to do the next one.
A lot of our focus has been on what's happening at the Capitol during the inaugural. But as you mentioned in the morning, the current president, so for our situation coming up, that President Obama and Mrs. Obama will welcome President-elect Trump and Mrs. Trump to the White House. They have tea and then they leave together. Then we sort of follow the car and we go to the Capitol, and that's what we're watching. What's happening at the White House while it's because President Obama slept there the night before, and he's not going to bed there that night. So what's going on at the White House?
That's his residence until noon. But when he leaves to go to the Hill, they've moved out of their residence, and it's fascinating to watch. There are moving vans that will have been at the White House for 2 or 3 days prior. But it's still the Obama's residence until noon. When they leave for the Hill, dozens of workers come out of the woodwork. For example, in the West Wing, the walls are covered, at least in the lower level, with pictures of President Obama and his administration. All of those pictures disappear. And by the time the Trumps arrive, probably 2:30 at the White House, those pictures are now replaced with Trump pictures hanging there. And all the personal possessions of the Obamas have been removed from the White House and from the residence, and all of the Trumps have been moved in.
It's how we all think packing and moving should go when we move from one house to the next. but never happens that way for us. But this is actually, it goes exactly as it's supposed to.
Yes, and it's all coordinated by the White House Usher's office, at least the residence portion, and it's very meticulously orchestrated. Everybody has a task, everybody knows who is responsible for what, and it involves dozens of people. The building itself, the White House, is property of the National Park Service, and the Park Service plays a very significant role in doing all of these little pieces that allow the new incoming president and his wife, when they arrive at their new home, that it's their home. And this is one of those rare moments when you've got 3 or 4 hours when the occupants are not there, that you can do this work.
Coming up on our next episode.
To myself, what's a kid from Spanish Fork, Utah, doing in the Oval Office? And I'd often ask myself that when I was in there, and then one day I just realized, well, not everybody could be from Spanish Fork, Utah. It was a humbling thing to have the President of the United States say thank you. And I just said, Mr. President, thank you for allowing me this privilege and honor.